Hello everybody and welcome back to another Doctor Who book review on the Host Productions. In today's review I'm going to continue taking a look at the Doctor Who target novelisation releases of 2023. In today's review, another 10th Doctor new series story being The Planet of the Ood as written by Keith Temple, which did of course originally air as a part of Doctor Who Series 4 alongside Catherine Tate as Donna Noble in 2008. So this book is of course available to purchase now from all good bookshops in the UK, as well as also being available online, and it is a series of which that if you are looking to get into Doctor Who book releases, I do definitely recommend the target novelisation range, because especially if you are in the mindset to read, they are so comforting and easy to read and immerse yourself within the adventure, as well as being considerably small, meaning that you can get through a book fairly quickly if you are an average speed reader, or even, to be honest, if you're someone who struggles with reading like myself. I think that the language that is used throughout quite a lot of the target novelisations is incredibly accessible, making it great for many Doctor Who fan audiences. So today's review is The Planet of the Ood, a book in fact that I was incredibly excited to see announced. It is a brilliant story from Doctor Who Series 4, one of my personal favourites, and it was in fact the second book within the 2023 series that I was most looking forward to reading. So I have in fact already reviewed The Waters of Mars from this series, as well as Kablam, so if you are interested in Doctor Who target novelisations, then I recommend checking out those reviews. So I do love the whole concept of the Ood. The Series 2 two-parter is without a doubt one of the show's finest hours, and Planet of the Ood is a superb follow-up story. I'd happily see the return of the Ood on screen, as they are such a brilliant creation. One of the things which Keith Temple can really be praised for within this target novelisation is maximising the threat of the Red Eye Ood. So the story does unfold much like it does on screen, seeing that balance of power shift from Halpern and Ood operations to the Ood themselves. Keith provides further insight into the Ood as a species, and despite being written in prose, rather oddly it adds an extra level to their visual appearance. I love how the book details that the Ood have these octopus-like suckers at the end of their hands and feet, allowing them to affix themselves onto things. Naturally, this is quite handy for when infiltrating the Ood operations base, wiping out the humans one by one. And when the Ood buyers think that the coast is clear, have they tried looking upwards at the ceiling? There's lots of brilliantly brutal moments throughout this book. It really adds an extra level of horror to the Ood, and again something of which that I would love to see further represented on screen. This book is simply further presentation of the Ood's potential and the amount of different stories that you could tell with them. The whole concept of the Red Eye Ood may have horrifying implications. Despite its constant similarity to the TV serial, I think this novelisation adds subtle dialogue and interlocking small scenes which result in the story having a more polished flow. I think this story may present what Keith Temple's true intention was for the TV episode, showing how the adventure could perhaps be restricted on screen due to the likes of time constraints with broadcast, but also the way that the episodes are edited. The book overall allows for more breathing space between scenes, but also a little bit of juggling about just to tell the story in a different way. Further small pieces of explanation allow for additional world building, although I think that this may take away from some of the story's later revelations, making them a bit too obvious. But perhaps I only think that because I am incredibly familiar with the 2008 serial, and I think anyone reading this book probably knows exactly what is coming, especially with Halpern turning into the Ood at the very end. What's really clever with this book is that being a written narrative, it allows you to get inside the heads of these characters, which is perfect when you have a character the likes of the Ood with these strong psychic abilities. I feel like the Ood are more represented within this story, and I have a gained understanding of their species as a whole, but also that kindness within them. Naturally, this really emphasises the enslaved themes and highlights the story's message even further. There is this great description at the very beginning of the book as Ood Delta 50, the one that we see in fact shot at the beginning of Planet of the Ood in the actual TV episode, kind of narrates how the Ood sphere and the songs is almost hypnotising him and making him recall memories that he thought long gone, that he didn't even realise that he lost. I thought that was a really clever way of showing how the Red Eye influence is not particularly evil or making the Ood into a villain, but instead opening their eyes to something that they've previously long forgot. Comparing to the Waters of Mars target novelisation, that story added full-on chapters to pad out the story's characters, which deviated entirely from what was seen on screen. And I did think that this worked incredibly well and brought the story to life even more. Planet of the Ood takes an alternative approach, expanding upon what we've seen on screen in a more subtle manner. Aside from the odd new scene here and there with the rich Ood buyers, and some further expansion on the Ood conversion process, which I thought was rather intriguing. As a reader, however, I would definitely lower your expectations when it comes to entirely new content. So I would say that this book is a much more traditional take of a Doctor Who target novelisation, which if that is something for you, then I recommend picking up this book, but also at the same time, don't go into this expecting mountains of brand new content. I am really undecided about how I feel with this book not containing as much new material as I initially expected, because the TV story is brilliant as it is, so there is a strong argument to be made for why change and add to something that is already brilliant. But this, I think, can also apply to the Waters of Mars, and that really helps the novelisation of format just to hit home on quite a lot of its themes, but also add extra levels, or even sort of layers to that onion, I suppose, allowing you to dig into the minds of the characters a bit more. So either way, this book is a great retelling, but as a reader, you may finish the book hoping for more than you actually got. In particular, I absolutely love Ood Sigma for some reason, and I was expecting more from Ood Sigma, perhaps to have more of a voice, quite literally, and I think he is such a big part of the story, but he's sort of a character that lurks in the shadows and gradually pulls the strings, which again from a narrative extent makes sense, but I was expecting maybe a chapter digging into his character exclusively with him having sole focus, but maybe that lack of additional voice just adds to that growing captivity theme that the Ood is held within throughout the vast majority of this story. And while we are on the subject of captivity, Keith Temple does a great job of making Halpern a right arse. On screen he is heartless and chilling and it's an excellent performance, but the book adds in some further horrible moments just to reinforce how much of an unpleasant person he is, seeing the Ood as nothing more than a company asset, but also his horrid treatment of specifically human employees within Ood operations. He's not particularly horrible directly to them, he's just really unpleasant for no reason at all. And then you have characters the likes of Mr. Kess, who is also horrible. His strong speciesist attitudes towards the Ood and his longing to cause them suffering makes his inevitable end very, very satisfying to read. But also the way that the Ood interact with said death, it's perfection, absolute chef's kiss moment. I think that the Ood are brilliantly witty, and without saying too much, I think that they have a way of presenting things, and again it's brilliant that this actually comes off within the written format, is that the Ood don't actually need to say words to get their point across, just the way they act being incredibly calm, usually when they're not rabid and Ood-eye with all the glowing red stuff going on. They're just an incredibly calm species, but also really sassy. I think the relationship between the Doctor and Donna also comes across really, really well within the target novelisation format. I can recall reading parts of the Fires of Pompeii novelisation from the previous wave of target novelisation releases, and there is this rich dynamic between the characters which lets the story flow so naturally. They have a great energy, and Donna's emotional struggles throughout the events of the Ood Sphere are nicely documented within the book. It does somewhat feel like we are seeing the story from her perspective, but also the Doctor gets lots of nice moments in there as well. Ten's energy and fighting for the right thing does make him very much feel like a hero of justice. So they both make for great central characters. I definitely got the sense throughout this book that they take the reader by the hand and take them on this space age adventure. Again, unlike some of the other target novelisation releases, I feel like this book isn't completely out there and experimental for no reason at all. It tells the story how it is, it's very faithful to the TV episode, and subsequently I did find it very comforting to read because of that. And I would happily see more adaptations of Doctor Who Series 4 in the future. Likewise, I would love, really, really love, to see more Target novelisations adapting Series 1 stories, because the more Ninth Doctor content, the better. I suppose one of the things that's really handy when it comes to the Ood is that we had that brilliantly satanic episode within Series 2 showing the Red Eye in full force and the threat that that brings, certainly when the Ood are under possession, and then you have this story which again tackles the Red Eye, but in a very different way, showing the human implication and the human actions and the way that they've brutally enslaved, as well as manipulated this species into a commodity and something to be sold. And I think that again there's those lovely echoes to being back on Earth and the way that we treat people, and I think it is an interesting read because of that, but it also made me realise how if the Ood weren't to return to screen in a full episode capacity, this also makes for a lovely end for the Ood as characters, because we had that brilliantly evil two-parter, and then we have this one with the Ood finally breaking free of the shackles of slavery, and we have these lovely scenes at the very end which are really heartwarming, and that relief that the Ood can go out into the Ood sphere and once more just have fun and be this race that has had all of its life and hopes and dreams taken away from them and entirely forgotten, but now at the end of this story they have their mind back once again, quite literally, with the Ood brain, and that's really heartwarming. So it's one of those books that covers lots of sort of darker themes, especially in relation to human behaviour, but then it has that feel-good ending as well, and of course Halpern and Kess get utterly obliterated, so that is excellent to see or read about as well. So this is one of those Target novelisations. I think if you like the TV story, then you will definitely like this Target novelisation, but also at the same time, I think it's just a really satisfying Doctor Who read. I think it is a great adventure, and it has really nicely transgressed the boundaries between TV into the novelisation formats. Yeah, a great book, and one that I thoroughly enjoyed reading. So I don't quite know what is next for this series. It seems like I have unintentionally started reviewing the Target novelisations. I wasn't initially planning on reviewing them in this much detail. From the 2023 wave, looking at the bookshelf currently, I do still have the Zygon Invasion and the Warriors Gate releases to go. I don't know if I'm going to be reading them anytime soon, simply because I've got a few busy weeks on the way, but also at the same time, I can't even recall much of the Zygon Invasion, and I feel like I would need to revisit that story on TV before reading the book, so I can kind of appreciate the differences between both of the formats, if that makes sense. But either way, I've really loved discussing these books and kind of comparing it to the TV story. I think that there is something about reading a Doctor Who book and sort of discussing the narrative and the different way that the characters are presented, which is kind of quite therapeutic. So yeah, these videos have been a bit more discussion based, but I think it's definitely been something that I've enjoyed doing. And I suppose if you would like to hear more of them in the future, then why not leave a little bit of support in the comments section below, and I may contemplate reviewing more of them in the future, I suppose. So thank you very much for watching this review, have a nice day, and I shall see you all next time.